Okay, welcome. I am Matt Urbanski with Team RunRun, and today I have Coach Natalie Lutz out of wait, is it Delaware?
No, you were right the first time, Delaware.
Wilmington, right? Wilmington, Delaware.
Yep.
Yes. And we are going to talk, though, not about races in Delaware today. We're going to talk about the Indianapolis Monumental Marathon. And Natalie had a rocking race there this past fall. I think set a PR.
Yep.
Yep. And she's going to basically what we're going to do today is she's going to give us tips on how you can race this, be prepared for the course so you can be your best on race day, and hopefully give us a few training tips on things to think about when we're thinking about race specific preparation for the Indy Monumental Marathon. So with that, Natalie, well, first, welcome. Thanks for doing this. And my first question is, let's imagine you have athletes that you're coaching who are doing this race next fall or this coming fall. What would be, say, the 2 or 3 main things you would prepare them for when you're telling them about the course? Specifically, like they're in their taper and they're heading to Indy, getting ready for the race. Yeah. What is there that they need to know so they have their expectations ready for race day?
So I think the first thing is pretty important is the beginning. It's not a humongous race, but it is a larger race. It's not one of the smaller local races. So there's a large amount of people. So the beginning, you're kind of boxed in. So and then there are parts of the race where there's road divisions that they actually split, and that became like I love the race, but it became a little bit of a hazard for people real quick. If you don't see it and someone else moves, there's a barricade there, and so I would warn them about that. That was one thing I recalled. And generally the race itself, there are pockets of a lot of people, which is great for crowd support. But then there are parts when you get out of the city, so it goes up and comes back down into the city, like a big loop. But there are parts where it gets lonely and there's nobody around. And then back at the end, when you're coming back into the city, you get more energy. So I would let them know about that. There are some spots where it gets a little bit lonely, but for the most part, there's a great amount of people there, great crowd support. And I think that's about it. There was a lot of fuel on the course. There was a lot of hydration. Probably one of the most hydrated marathons I've been to other than Boston. Yeah, there was just a lot of general support out there.
Awesome. When I want to think about these divisions in the road in the beginning, that could clearly be an issue. How far into the race was it before things started to spread out for you a little bit? And for reference, you ran 3 hours flat for this marathon, so you were up near the front. So for someone running 3 hours, if someone running 4 hours, this might be a different answer. But how long did it take for it to start thinning out for you, where you had some room to run?
Maybe mile 4.
Okay.
Yeah, 4 to 5. But it still was tight in there. The first 1 to 3, I remember, really just watching people's feet in front of me so I don't kick anybody, and getting boxed in. And there was there was construction going on at the time too. I don't know if that had an issue, but there were a lot of cones everywhere in the middle of the course. So it was just for the first few miles though. Otherwise it was, beautifully run.
Nice. And once it did start spreading out, like, did you, in the 3 hour range where you were at, were there people to run with? Like, I'm trying to imagine like how competitive the race is. Did you have people to be with all the time?
Yes.
It's lonely, without.
Yeah.
But yeah, you had people the whole time to run with.
I did. I had people, a large, huge pack in the very beginning, very tight. And then even at the half marathon mark, some girl I met the day before was like coming up on me on my shoulder saying, "Hey, how you doing?" There was people all around me at that point. They were really great about making it very clear where the half goes and the full goes. Because I have done that in a half marathon. I went with the full marathon before.
Oh.
And I was on my way to a PR. It was the worst feeling. When I got to like 13, I was like, where's the I don't see a finish line, nothing. I went with the full marathon. So I really appreciated the fact that they were very diligent about how they separated each race.
Got it. To go back to the start of the race again, do they have corrals, or how easy was it to sort of position yourself into where you think you should be based on your expectations for finishing time?
I hopped into my corral probably 2 minutes before the start. So
Hmm.
it was super easy. Most of the hotels are right at the start, or if not, at least within a half a mile or a quarter mile walking distance. And I just walked right out. That's what I loved about this race. It was big race feel, but so much like small town logistics. You
Yeah.
didn't have all this hoopla to get here or there. I used the bathroom in the hotel lobby, just walked right out onto the starting line in the first corral. I had no issue. And then we went off. So
And were the corrals assigned based on previous finishing times, or did you say what you thought you could do? How did they do the corrals?
can't remember exactly, but I'm pretty sure they did have you put a previous race in, and they had to like check and make sure that that was information was correct. Or you put in a time that you think you've done. But I think I had to have my time like verified.
Got it. Yeah, because I don't know if you've been to those races where part of the competition is how close can you get to the front,
Mhm.
even if you have no business being in the front. And then everyone's
Yeah.
trying to not run into each other, and it can be a little crazy. So it's nice when a race has that part organized really well, I found.
Absolutely. Yeah, it was great.
What I want to talk about the conditions there. And granted, you don't live in Indianapolis, so you don't know what it's like every fall season in Indianapolis, but I just imagine like cold and wind. Um, what was it like for the weather there, and how can you prepare people for that?
So historically, it has excellent marathon weather. I look at what's that? There's a website, findmymarathon.com, and it has all the historical weather for each race. I think going back 10 years, and they have excellent weather, always really good temps. I think last year it did rain though. That's what I heard
Okay.
from some of the other runners, that it rained torrential downpours. So that
Ooh.
was not that great of a race that year. But most years it's little wind. I think I've seen between 6 to upward to 10 is the range that it's been. And I think the day I ran, there was maybe 9, 6 to 9 was the wind. And yeah, it's really good weather in general, and it's just cool enough. 52 to 56, I think, is their general weather for that time of year. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good race for that. Yeah.
Okay. Very cool. All right. Well, then, if you were training someone for this race, not just talking about what to do when you get to Indianapolis, but in the say 3 to 4 months leading up to Indianapolis, are
Mhm.
there any? I mean, I looked at the course profile. I think in your race report, you said your Strava had 361 feet of elevation gain. So it's a pretty
Pretty
flat race.
flat. Hmm.
What are the key things that you tell an athlete when they're preparing for this marathon? Is there anything specific to this one?
It's just really a few gentle rollers here and there. You do feel them. I'm familiar with running on all completely flat and hilly courses. So for me, I felt like there were times I did feel it. I think I felt a few like inclinations, I would call them honestly, but they were at miles 16. And I think there was one around 18 in a neighborhood that I felt it in my quads. And I was like,
Yeah.
ugh. And I remember thinking to myself, I got 3 hours flat in 10 seconds. And I said to myself, if it wasn't for that hill by that house, and I remember it was decorated all for Halloween. And I like looked at that house and I was in such pain. And I'm like, oh, their house looks so cute. And I just remember thinking, and that was cool about the race. All the houses in this one area were decorated for Halloween. And I was like, oh, I wish I could just sit here and enjoy this like beautiful view. But I was in such pain at that point. But I remember thinking that that hill really, it wasn't even a hill, but it just was at the time of the race where it got me a little bit, and I did slow down. But otherwise, I would consider a really flat course. I think Find My Marathon rates it as mostly flat, not entirely flat, but mostly flat.
Okay. So then just kind of like standard marathon build with your standard marathon kind of workouts to
Yeah,
prepare for
yeah.
this. There's
I
no
wouldn't
like
do any
downhill work
specific
or
hill work for it. I don't think you need that. I would suggest maybe some athletes going on some little rollers just to get their leg, if they're not in an area that has, you know, hills, or some people that live in like perfectly flat areas, but if they could go somewhere just to have a little bit of undulation in the terrain or something, just to give that change up, which I think is super great for a race when you have a little bit of, you know, a muscle change up to be able to use different muscles. I think it helps in a marathon to change them up. So
Nice. And then just to kind of wrap things up, to talk about the vibe of the race, like you have a race report that you wrote about this too, that we have on the Team RunRun blog, and we'll link that in the YouTube comment or notes here. But like you mentioned, I'm just thinking of some that I think are highlights, and then you can add to the things that I'm saying. But like staying in a hotel right near the start finish sounds like an amazing deal. You know, like I think of a race like New York, and it's like you're taking a metro to the ferry to a bus, you know. Whereas like Indy, you can get a hotel. It's probably not too expensive right near the start. That sounds amazing.
yeah.
Big enough that you have a lot of people to run with, but not so crazy that like you can't run your
Yes.
pace and run your race. Maybe you get some weather, maybe you get some wind, but the odds are fairly good that you're going to get good weather. And there's spectators in pockets, but you got to be ready for some quiet time too, which is okay. And any other highlights, things that when you think back about this race that you remember that you'd be like, oh yeah, you should do this race because of this.
I just loved everything about how they ran it. The logistics when you go to the expo. I don't know, you know, everybody's different, but for me, I don't like the super huge races. Like for me, Boston and all that's involved, and it ends up being sometimes a little bit too much for me of a, you know, and a headache. And this was just so well done. You get your bib quickly, but yet they had a lot of vendors there, so it wasn't as if there wasn't much going on. They catered a lot to I feel like the individual experience. I went to another race recently, which was very big, and they had all these cameras to take your photos with your bib, but you had to pay, and there were lines upon lines. And I just thought, what a way to commercialize, you know, running and the marathon. And that just isn't for me. That's for some people, but not for me. So I love that Indy, you could get your bib, take your picture wherever you felt like it, move on out, get what you needed to, get your socks, or if you needed gels, and then just roll out. So it was perfect in that regard, in that you had that big experience, you had a big expo, you had a big crowd. I mean, there was a big crowd in the beginning, and there's a huge crowd at the end. There's a good crowd for about the last 2 miles coming in. People are cheering. It was probably the second largest marathon I've went to, maybe third, other than Boston and Houston. So you have all that, but again, that small town, easy logistics, you just roll right out of the hotel and you're right there. I mean, so many people were doing their warm-ups right there on the street, and then going into the hotel to go to the bathroom right before their start. And it was just highly recommended to me by a few other people. I had never heard of it a few years ago, and I'm so glad somebody told me about it, because I definitely want to go again. I do.
Cool. Well, we'll get this on the radar of athletes at Team RunRun. It's a good race to go run fast. It sounds like a fun experience, likelihood of good weather. Cool. Maybe go explore a new city if you've never been in Indianapolis.
Yeah.
Last question. This is a more personal question. You ran 3 hours and 10 seconds. Did you? I'm guessing you didn't cross the start line right when the gun went off. You probably had to there was the times didn't match up. But did you know you were really close? Like, what was it like being 3 hours and 10 seconds?
So it's really funny. As I was running, I had a funny race. I purposely started out slower, which I was happy with the crowd for that reason, to kind of pull me back. And then I got to the halfway point and I was on track. And then my overall pace started to fall back a little bit from breaking 3. And then I think mile 18, somewhere around there, 16, 18, I started to pick it back up again. And so I started to, you know, take down the pace a little bit, and I was getting closer to the goal. Something, you know, I'm sure you know, of course, that something sometimes mentally happens to you towards the end of the race where you just you just don't care at that point. Like you've given so much where you just get in that fuzzy state of mind and you're just like, all I want to do is cross that finish line. And I remember looking down at my watch, and then I must have went somewhere mentally. And then I come back to life, like right around when I'm turning the corner, we're in this huge crowd. And I kind of see the clock, and then I look at my watch and I was like, oh my God, I have a chance to do this. I think mentally I went somewhere where I was like, I'm okay around 3. I'm okay. Yeah. And then I realized how close I was. And I was like, as soon as it hit 26.2, I said, I'm clocking this. I'm stopping my watch because I might never see this again. You know, I was like, I might never see a 2 in front of this distance. And then I just gunned it for the finish. I had no clue whether I made it or not, but I was just so happy because I thought, well, if I'm this close, maybe I can do it. I don't know. Yeah. So yeah.
That's awesome. That's so great to get to that point where you're like, I'm going for it. You know, I'm not holding anything back at this point. That's cool.
Yeah. Had I known a little bit earlier, but I never know. I just was somewhere else, man.
You'll just have to go back and try again, I guess.
Yeah, totally.
Well, Natalie, thank you so much. I think this is great information for anyone interested in doing the Indy Monumental Marathon. And it sounds like a race people should do.
Yeah, it is. Try it out. You have to put it on your list.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Thanks, Matt.